All right, this came in from a trusted friend, and I have not read it, so we're going to read it together for the first time. It seems like there's a never-ending abyss of injustice in America. The Bible actually talks about truth has fallen in the street, and I think that's the situation that we currently have. Anyway, let's read this together. I have not read it. I do not know what we're about to get into. Let's find out. Hey Rudy, I know you're busy with Angela. I know you're busy, but Angela and her husband could definitely use some exposure about what's happening to them in Washington State. I'm not sure if they were targeted because of their association with FF, which is Freedom Fighter. That's referring to Schaeffer Cox, Freedom Fighter Schaeffer Cox, and the Ron Paul groups or not, but it's pretty likely. Angela Faire, she's not, in case you guys don't know, she built the Free Schaeffer Cox website, and that has been the launching pad, the Rock of Gibraltar to send people to learn about Schaeffer Cox's case. So she has definitely had a hand in standing up for Schaeffer Cox. She built the website, for goodness sakes. It says sent Friday, July the 1st, 2016, 7:19 a.m. in the morning. Subject, Washington State violates James Faire's Sixth Amendment rights. Dear friends, on June the 7th, 2016, Monica Watson, Commissioner for the Court of Appeals, Division 3, ruled to terminate the motion for discretionary review. In response, Faire's attorney, Stephen Pidgeon, stated, the Commissioner completely ignored the Sixth Amendment and statutory requirements that a notice of appearance must be in writing. The provisioners of the Sixth Amendment render 7 months of incarceration illegal, yet the Commissioner failed to even mention the Sixth Amendment in her decision to rubber stamp Okanogan County's view of due process. Commissioner Monica Watson clearly demonstrated she is incapable of honoring her oath to uphold the U.S. and Washington State constitutions by blatantly ignoring the Sixth Amendment. On Tuesday, June the 28th, 2016, Attorney Pidgeon filed a motion to modify ruling in the Court of Appeals, Division 3 for the state of Washington. This time around, the motion will be heard by an actual court, not a commissioner. The Court of Appeals will either uphold James Faire's constitutional rights or they will cover up for their underlings. We are informed that if they cover up, Stephen Pidgeon will file the appeal with a higher court. Month after month, friends and supporters of James Faire observed the despicable mockery of justice in Okanogan County. Month after innocent James Faire was paraded into courtroom, hands shackled, falsely charged, and without legal representation, again, Okanogan County has egregiously violated Faire's state and federally prosecuted, let me read that again. Again, Okanogan County has egregiously violated Faire's state and federally protected constitutional rights. Please help support the fight for liberty and justice for all. Legal expenses are enormous. Please consider making a donation to help James Faire's growing legal expenses. Your help is needed in keeping this atrocity against James in public view. Please read and share the following update with your family, friends, and associates. What has happened and continues to happen to James can happen to any one of us. And then there's a link to a US Observer article, and it says, thank you, James and Angela. Okay, we jump over to the US Observer article. Let's read this here. Commissioner Monica Watson ignores Sixth Amendment in Faire case. Prosecutor Carl Sloan's malicious prosecution continues by Ed Snook, investigative reporter. Spokane, Washington, James Faire continues to bear the heavy burden that was placed upon him June the 19th, 2015, when Okanogan County Prosecutor Carl Sloan charged Faire with the egregious charges of murder 1 and assault 1, along with other lesser charges. Read the investigative backstory online at US Observer. Escaped with their lives, then charged with murder. escaped with their lives and charged with murder. The conspiracy to frame James Faire, the power of trust. How long is this? Let's go ahead and read this. It may be long, but so be it. By Ed Snook, investigative journalist. Okanogan County, Washington, we've been ambushed, was the simple one-line text message Angela Nobelis reports to have sent to the owner of the vehicle she and James Faire were driving. The text was sent when they got to the junction, an area they knew had cell coverage. Unlike where they had previously been on East Sourdough Road, it was at this time that Faire, from another phone, dialed 911 to report they had been attacked by a 300-plus-pound man with a chain. According to Nobelis, she and Faire were shaken to the core by being violently confronted just minutes earlier by a group of people, one with a chain, at a place they thought was safe, a place where they had, by invitation, stored many of their belongings, a place they had desperately tried to flee from for their lives. As they waited at the junction, Nobelis gave Faire the last hug she has been able to give her soulmate to date. Moments later, Tonascat police officer arrived on the scene, who immediately asked for their IDs. Nobelis recalled he began asking more questions, and both James and I requested an attorney, because we both heard of bad dealings with law enforcement before. The officer asked both of us to stand with our backs to the south, facing wall of junction. At this time, I was still of the mindset that we would be going home soon, that we were waiting for an Okanogan sheriff to arrive, take our statement, and let us be on our way. But that isn't what happened. When the sheriff's deputy arrived, he informed Faire and Nobelis that someone had died on Sourdough Road and that they would be taken into custody. They were read their Miranda rights, and both invoked their right to remain silent. James and I sat silently as we traveled together in the back of the sheriff's deputy SUV to the Okanogan County Courthouse. I'm guessing the trip was about 35 miles. I tried to eye contact with James for some sort of reassurance. He was stoic, I imagine as scared and concerned as I was. Finally, he whispered, "I love you," and I responded back. Those would be our last words to each other. Nobelis sorrowfully remembers of that night. It would be later that the deceased was 52-year-old Deborah L. Long. She had been run over and was found lying in the driveway. George Abrontis, the 48-year-old behemoth who, by all accounts, assailed Faire and Nobelis with expletives and the chain, had apparently also been injured when Faire tried to get away from being attacked. Faire and Nobelis were subsequently charged with murder, assault, trespass, and theft. Nobelis' murder and assault charges were dropped days later in defense of law enforcement investigation. In defense of law enforcement investigating, they interviewed witnesses at the scene who gave statements that they were in great part well rehearsed and believable, some of which were outright lies. The small group of insiders who provided false or unknowingly fabricated information to the police consisted of Richard Feingold, Ruth Brooks, Michael St. Pierre, and George Abrontis. I should stress at this point that not all insider witnesses were completely privy to the sophisticated plans of none other than Deborah Long, the deceased, and her cohorts. During the U.S. Observer's investigation into what we can only classify as an obvious self-defense accident, we have unearthed a web of deceit spun by Long for her personal gain, and it proves beyond doubt that what was told to police by the insiders was deceptive and conspired. The common denominator in this whole case is Michelle St. Pierre, a friend of all involved. Michelle died of cancer on June 15, 2015. Michelle had been living with Richard Feingold, who is the registered owner of the Sourdough Road property, located in north central Washington, where this incident took place. Michelle and Richard had moved to one of Michelle's properties located in Stanwood, Washington, western Washington state. As her cancer escalated, but had lived together at the Sourdough property, on and off during the preceding 3 years. According to witnesses, Faire and Nobellis had been storing their belongings at and taking care of the Sourdough property during the months leading up to this incident. George Abrantes, a renter at Michelle Stanwood's property, traveled to Sourdough property for the confrontation with Faire and Nobellis on June the 18th, 2015, as did Michael St. Pierre, Michelle's brother, and Ruth Brooks, Michelle's longtime friend. Most witnesses I have spoken to who knew Michelle St. Pierre and Richard Feingold considered them a couple, and most thought that they jointly owned their various properties. Faire and Nobellis had been personal friends with Michelle and Richard for at least 4 to 5 years, according to witnesses, although they had known Faire for much longer than that. Faire had been doing maintenance on St. Pierre's and Feingold's properties, while Angela Cook cleaned and attended to her terminally ill friend, Michelle. When Michelle was at Stanwood property, given the destitution they found when they arrived for a visit last February, Nobella started a fundraising campaign for Michelle and Richard while they were dealing with Michelle's illness. Murder or accident? After Michelle's death, Faire and Nobellis notified Feingold and Deborah Long that they would be traveling to Sourdough property to pick up their belongings, even though Michelle St. Pierre had already died. Long intentionally withheld this information from Faire and Nobellis. Upon arriving, James Faire got out of the truck, and when he saw a 300-plus pound George Abrantes coming at him with a chain, yelling obscenities, James drew his pistol he carried with him and held it at a low ready for a moment. According to an eyewitness, James was able to holster his gun and get back into his truck before being struck by the chain. After the incident, insider witnesses made it clear to police that the insiders intended to keep Faire and Nobellis from leaving Sourdough property under the deception that they were trespassing and committing theft. The police reports in this case make it quite clear that James Faire was attempting to leave the property after being attacked by Abrantes, who was wielding a quite dangerous weapon, a heavy chain. Since when does attempting to avoid assault become a crime? When does attempting to protect yourself and your family become murder? The police report quotes insider Michael St. Pierre. Everyone was yelling at James. George especially was yelling at James. George started banging on the truck with the chain with a lock on it and broke the window. The police reports go on to state that the truck had been struck with a chain and the side mirror was shattered. Insider witnesses controlled by Deborah Long. I'm having a hard time keeping up with all the players here. Who's this? Let me search for Deborah Long again. This is a picture of 3060 Sourdough, Tonnesket, the scene of the attack against James Faire and Angela Nobellis, and the death of Deborah L. Long. So Deborah Long is the lady who died. Insider witnesses controlled by Deborah Long. Deborah Long is the lady who died, and she's controlling the witnesses. I'm trying to understand that. It is obvious from reading the police reports that most, if not all, insider witnesses thought Deborah Long was an attorney. Ruth Brooks stated to police that Deborah Long owned her own law firm. The police report continues to quote Brooks, Deborah was the most knowledgeable of all of them. Deborah had suggested that they, meaning herself and the insider witnesses, come and secure the property and move Angela and Strat's belongings out of the house onto the porch or someplace that they could be notified to come and get them. So I guess Deborah, before she died, told these people to go get these people's belongings and move them out on the porch. Just prior to Faire and Nobellis arriving at Sourdough property Long's plans apparently changed. She instructed the insiders with her to move their vehicles out of sight. Long was obviously preparing her ambush. According to police reports, as soon as Faire and Nobellis arrived, Long instructed Richard Feingold to go next door and call the police. Long and George then waited until Faire pulled completely into the driveway before she and George rushed Faire and Nobellis. Long was obviously preparing her ambush. Isn't Long the one who died? Hold on a second. It would be later learned that the deceased was a 52-year-old Deborah L. Long. She had been run over and found lying in the driveway. According to police reports, as soon as Faire and Nobellis arrived, Long instructed Richard to go next door. Okay, just prior to Faire and Nobellis arriving at the Sourdough property, Long's plans apparently changed. She instructed the insiders with her to move their vehicles out of sight. Long was obviously preparing her ambush. According to police reports, as soon as Faire and Nobellis arrived, Long instructed Richard Feingold to go next door and call the police. Long and George, okay, George is this big guy here, then waited for Faire until Faire pulled completely into the driveway before she and George rushed Faire and Nobellis. Okay, so I'm trying to get the scene here. So these two people were coming to get their belongings. They pulled up in the driveway, and this guy and Deborah Long, who I don't think there's a picture of Deborah Long here, rushed them. Okay, so it's like following a play, and I'm trying to understand who all the people are. The unassociated witness. The only unbiased eyewitness at the scene of this accident was a 60-year-old Boyd McPherson. McPherson lived at the same private trailer park in Lake Stevens, Washington, as Faire and Nobellis, and he was hired the morning of June the 18th by Faire to travel to the Sourdough property to help the couple haul their property back to Lake Stevens, according to McPherson. He had only spoken to Faire and Nobellis a couple of times and really didn't know them. McPherson stated, immediately when Jim's vehicle stopped after entering the driveway, two people aggressively, and I mean aggressively, came to Jim's side of the truck. Jim had stepped out of the truck, and he stated that he was just there to get their belongings and leave. Jim was very calm, but he also had a very serious look on his face. Jim holstered his gun, and he was able to get into the truck. He showed extreme discipline to be able to do that. McPherson continued, the heavy guy, George Abranes, started hitting Jim's door with a chain, and I saw the mirror shatter and the window flex. Jim backed his truck up. The guy, George Abrantes, and the gal, Deborah Long, then went to the front of the vehicle and directed their attention towards the passenger, Angela Nobellis. They continued yelling threats and obscenities. The gal in the orange shirt, Deborah Long, literally tried to tie her shirt to the grill of the truck to prevent Jim from leaving. Jim continued to back up. At about that time, another individual, Michael St. Pierre, came running out of the house and towards the back of Jim's truck, screaming accusations and vulgarities. Jim could back up no further, so he made a fairly aggressive move to the right to avoid people and was able to exit the driveway. We didn't have any cell phone reception, so we drove to the convenience store on the main highway and spoke to each other. Jim called 911. The setup. In early 2014, Deborah Long enters the picture and takes control over those loving. Let me read this again. In early 2014, Deborah Long enters the picture and takes control over those living with Michelle and Richard. One witness states Deborah had total control over Richard, and George listened to and obeyed Deborah like a puppy dog. Why? Why did Long, who was with Michelle under the guise of helping her deal with the legalities of her properties before her death, plant seeds of distrust regarding James Faire and Angela Nobellis? According to most all witnesses, it was Long who continually fueled the fire of hatred towards Faire and Nobellis regarding the GoFundMe fundraising. Further, it was Deborah Long who planted the idea that Richard Feingold, that Faire and Nobellis were out to get Feingold's sourdough property. The old saying, "the proof is in the pudding," certainly proved to be true when I discovered that Deborah Long, working with her live-in boyfriend Michael Fritch of Loomis, California, created a trust fund called Maple Road Holding Trust, which named Fritch as a trustee. A look into the public record shows that 2 properties owned by Michelle St. Pierre were transferred to Michael Fritch. For additional first-hand facts on the setup, read the sensational companion article as to this one, titled "The Conspiracy to James Faire, The Power of Trust," located on the front page of this edition. Richard Feingold deceives police. On June 17, 2015, Feingold filed a trespassing and theft report with police against Faire and Nobellis for their operation of a GoFundMe site that they had set up for Michelle for trespassing on Feingold's sourdough property. Feingold's attempt was directed by Deborah Long and occurred just one evening prior to Long getting run over. In the police report, Feingold stated that he really didn't know that much about James and Angela. However, numerous witnesses and many emails between them paint a much different picture. Richard told police, "I've been away since September of 2014. Emails from Michelle to Angela and Strat into September 2014 state, "Dear Angel and Strat, thanks so much for watching out for our property. Love you so much and miss you terribly, and home, sourdough property as well." Michelle then refers to a trip Richard plans on making to Sourdough. Don't know if you can hook up, but I know Richard would love to see you. Does this sound like Richard really doesn't know that much about James and Angela? As he told police on June the 17th, 2015, or does this sound exactly like it was, that Richard had been indoctrinated by Deborah and he was out to get James and Angela by lying to the police? James and Angela had many of their belongings, including a dump truck and a trailer at Sourdough property, and they had both Michelle and Richard's permission to do so. According to one witness, Richard and James used to go shooting together, and James gave him instructions for free. James Faire is well known for his firearms training abilities and his love of the sport. Obviously, the 2 couples knew each other very well and were in fact friends long before this incident occurred. I am in possession of emails and other documents that clearly prove that Faire and Nobellis had carte blanche permission to not only store their possession at Sourdough, but to stay there if they needed to. Innocent man jailed for over 2 months. On July the 19th, 2015, I spoke with Sheriff Rogers in response to his interview with local TV stations made public shortly after the incident. Rogers had claimed that Faire and Nobellis were squatters and that Deborah Long had been murdered. I told him he was very mistaken and why. He was cordial and turned me over to Chief Deputy Brown. On July the 15th, 2015, Deputy Brown called and I gave him more than enough evidence to conclude Faire's innocence. He took notes and told me that he would deliver the notes and my number to Detective Sloan. I have not had any further contact with law enforcement in Okanogan County. However, I received reports that they have been actively investigating this case. On the downside, the 2 main issues I gave to Deputy Brown, who have complete knowledge of this case, have not been contacted by law enforcement yet, and still James Faire sits in his cell at the Okanogan County Jail. On July the 23rd, 2015, I wrote a letter to Okanogan Prosecutor Carl Sloan, Detective Sloan's brother, wherein I disclosed the main facts of the case. I have not received any response from Mr. Sloan. Ethical police and prosecutors usually get to the truth in short order, and they always pursue justice. This case is actually a very simple one. In fact, the police have already obtained enough evidence to conclude that James Faire and Angela Nobellis are completely innocent. They also have plenty of evidence that show George Abrantes and Richard Feingold factually committed very serious crimes. On the other hand, bad police and prosecutors rush to judgment. They make public statements that are false, and then they do everything within their power to cover up their injustice. At this time, we choose to give the police and Prosecutor Sloan every benefit of the doubt. However, Prosecutor Sloan needs to drop this false prosecution and release James Faire immediately. Don't miss our next edition for updates on this case. Anyone with information on any of the people involved in this case, including the police and prosecutor, are urged to contact Edward Snook at 541-474-7885 or by sending an email to editor@usobserver.com. And remember, read the companion article on the front page of this edition that outlines conspiracy Deborah Long, among others, engaged in, which ultimately led to her accidental death. Editor's note: I would like to ask our readership to please donate to James Faire if possible. Due to the false prosecution he is facing, he is without work and struggling to obtain the funds to hire competent counsel. We would not ask for your help if it were not for the fact that James is 100% innocent, and he is an exceptional human being. To donate, go here, and it takes you to this page. Okay, let's continue on with this updated article. Not only is Faire being maliciously prosecuted based on false charges, he has endured 8 months of wrongful and illegal incarceration. A key point to keep in mind: within a week of Faire's arrest, he requested a court-appointed attorney after filing for indigent status. On June 23, 2015, the court approved the order which appointed Okanogan County Contract Indigent Defender to represent Faire. The order stated that the contract defender shall decide which attorney will represent the defendant, and said attorney shall promptly file a notice of appearance herein. Attorney Nicholas Blount filed a notice of appearance and inadequately represented Faire until he withdrew on August 8, 2015. From that date, Faire went the next 6 months without any counsel whatsoever until he was able to obtain private counsel in January 2016. On February 10, 2016, James Faire's private attorney, Stephen Pidgeon, filed a writ of habeas corpus demanding that the court drop Faire's charges for violating Faire's state and federally protected constitutional rights. On March 7, 2016, Judge Christopher Culp denied Faire's writ of habeas corpus, condoning the fact that a defendant can sit in jail for months and months and appear at numerous hearings without representation. In Culp's findings of facts and conclusions of law denying Faire's motion for a writ of habeas corpus, the court found that counsel appeared with the defendant at each hearing. There is no evidence in the record, declarations, or an offer of proof to show a loss of evidence based on the defendant's allegations of denial or of counsel. There is no evidence in the record, declarations, or offer of proof to show a loss of defense based on the loss of defense evidence due to the actions of counsel. The court then went on to hold that there is no basis to support the writ of habeas corpus. The court erred in these conclusions. Due to Judge Culp's ruling, attorney Stephen Pidgeon filed a motion for discretionary review in the Court of Appeals. This Division 3 of the state of Washington on Monday, April 18, 2016. The state filed a timely response, and Faire filed a response on May the 9th, 2016. Okanogan County Defender Contractor Ethics. Attorney Melissa McDougall has a dual role in Okanogan County Office of Public Defender. She is the contract administrator, contract defender for the office, which provides legal services to indigent men and women. She also serves as a public defender. As the contract administrator, McDougall is responsible for assigning public defenders to indigent men and women. According to 2015 status report on public defense in Washington State, dated April of 2016, Okanogan County delivers public defense representation through a contract system with a 2-attorney law firm for coverage of all indigent defense cases. The firm subcontracts with 6 additional attorneys for cases not handled by the firm. Since the report was published, the U.S. Observer has learned that the contract defender is now a one-woman office consisting of Melissa McDougall, who hires some subcontractors pursuant to private contracts. McDougall was in conflict as she was representing a co-defendant, Angela Nobelis, in regards to the same nexus of facts. Previously, on August the 3rd, 2015, Okanogan County Superior Court Judge Christopher Culp announced in open court that Nicholas Blount, Faire's former attorney of record, was no longer part of the county's public defender pool. Amongst the many present in the courtroom were Melissa McDougall, public defender for Angela Nobelis, Carl Sloan, Okanogan County prosecutor, and Angela Nobelis. According to the court records, once Nicholas Blount's notice to withdraw was filed with the court clerk on August 18, 2015, no other attorney filed a notice of appearance until attorney Stephen Pidgeon was filed one on January 11, 2016. Melissa McDougall had 2 weeks to assign new counsel to an indigent James Faire. Yet on August 17, 2015, Faire was brought into the courtroom without representation or knowledge by Okanogan Office of Public Defense that Nicholas Blount was no longer his attorney. In a citizen's request, Tanya Craig, deputy clerk to the Board of Okanogan Commissioners, stated that Nicholas Blount's contract with the public defender pool expired at the end of July 2015 and was not renewed. One has to ask the obvious question, why? Why would Melissa McDougall assign a felony murder case to a public defender whose contract was about to expire? Why, 4 days before Blount's contract expiration, did he have James sign the court's paperwork setting a series of 5 status conferences? Why did the court allow Nicholas Blount to withdraw from a case of this magnitude without any notice? Why did the court allow James Faire to be brought before the court without representation month after month after month? Prosecutor Sloan continues to deceive. Recently, Prosecutor Carl Sloan continued his manipulative tactics and deceived the Court of Appeals Division III of the state of Washington in his response to the discovery review. In Sloan's response to the motion for discretionary review, he stated the following. On August 17, 2015, a previously scheduled status conference was held. Attorney Melissa McDougall appeared with the defendant. At that time, McDougall was with Angela Nobelis' attorney of record, Faire's co-defendant. Carl Sloan ignored this fact. Furthermore, Sloan referred to court order signed by Okanogan County Superior Court Judge Christopher Culp, dated June 23, 2015, which stated, the contract defender shall decide which attorney will represent the defendant, and said attorney shall promptly file a notice of appearance herein. The prosecutor, Sloan, maintained that James Faire had counsel because a public defender was in the courtroom with him. Sloan failed to acknowledge that a public defender did not spend time studying Faire's case or filing motions on Faire's behalf, such as a bail reduction. Sloan failed to acknowledge that, in fact, not one public defender took any action on Faire's behalf, showing that there was an established working relationship between James Faire and any public defender. I maintain James Faire did not have inadequate counsel. He had no counsel whatsoever. Above all, Okanogan County Prosecutor Carl Sloan apparently failed to realize that James Faire appeared in court with his co-defendant's attorney, Melissa McDougall, and therefore being represented was a complete conflict of interest. Sloan is not this ignorant. He has simply grown accustomed to unjustly abusing defendants with no accountability whatsoever. Commissioner Monica Wasson ignores the Sixth Amendment. On June 7, 2016, Monica Wasson, Commissioner for the Court of Appeals Division III, ruled to terminate the motion for discretionary review. In response, Faire's attorney, Stephen Pidgeon, stated, the Commissioner completely ignored the Sixth Amendment and statutory requirements that a notice of appearance must be in writing. The provisions of the Sixth Amendment render 7 months of incarceration illegal, yet the Commissioner failed to even mention the Sixth Amendment in her decision to rubber stamp the Okanogan County's view of due process. Commissioner Monica Wasson clearly demonstrated she is incapable of honoring her oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution and Washington state constitutions by blatantly ignoring the Sixth Amendment. On Tuesday, June the 28th, 2016, Attorney Pidgeon filed a motion to modify ruling in the Court of Appeals, Division III for the state of Washington. This time around, the motion will be heard by an actual court, not a commissioner. The Court of Appeals will either uphold James Faire's constitutional rights or they will cover up for their underlings. We are informed that if they cover up, Stephen Pidgeon will file the appeal with a higher court. Month after month, friends and supporters of James Faire observed the despicable mockery of justice in Okanogan County month after month, and innocent James Faire was paraded into the courtroom, hand-shackled, without legal representation. Again, Okanogan County has egregiously violated Faire's state and federal protected constitutional rights. Please help support the fight for liberty and justice for all. Legal expenses are enormous. Please consider making a donation to help James Faire's legal expenses. More detailed information and alternative ways to support James Faire are at the following Faire Foundation sites: Faire Foundation, Facebook, Faire Foundation. Okay. The reason this has a tie-in to Schaeffer Cox is Angela Nobelis, if I'm not mistaken, is the one who built this website. Let me go there real quick. I believe this lady built this website, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I think that's true. And so people that are very familiar with Schaeffer Cox also are familiar with this other story that I just read. So I'm just now, I just read that for the first time today. It'll take a while to sink in. There's a lot of players involved. I gathered there was a lady that was terminally ill, and there were some people that were taking care of her, and they set up an ambush, and the people were storing their belongings over at this place. Somebody got ran over when they were being ambushed and died. My goodness. Anyway, I'll put the links if you guys want to go educate yourself about that situation. And the tie-in with Schaeffer Cox is that the person who, the husband of the woman who built this website, I think is the one who's being denied his Sixth Amendment constitutional rights. And so I know that Maria, who is with Alaskans Board for Liberty, is aware of all of this. And I think Maria is seeking additional help in maintaining the website, because you guys know that we have problems keeping the donate button working properly, and we have problems with people getting pop-up messages on Schaeffer Cox's website. You know, John B. Wells got pop-up messages on Schaeffer Cox's website, and I've got a friend, Gerald, that also gets so we're just having all these issues, and it takes a lot of time and resources and work. It just consumes your life to try to stand up for justice, because our judicial system is broken down and is so full of corruption, and it's so easy to get overloaded. But at the same time, we know that we serve a mighty risen God, a mighty risen Savior, Jesus Christ, and nothing's too hard for him. So I go back to the saying by a good friend of mine, Wally Drake, Pastor Wally Drake, who happens to be running for president of the United States. And what he says is, don't get overwhelmed, do your best, and let God do the rest. And so that's the only advice I have, is let's do our best, let God do the rest.